Hey,
Hey, morning.
it's still morning for another hour.
Oh yeah, I always forget you're not in SF.
Yeah, it's it's a nice day today. We got well, actually, it looks like it's gonna be 90 degrees, so I take it back. It's gonna be too hot.
Hmm.
Everyone,
Hi, morning.
I just shared the Zoom link in the channel because I guess we all did the same thing, just joined last week's meeting invite because I think it's the same.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that should be the same link. Or
it is the same. It is the same Zoom, but is it fell off the calendar, so folks may forget or may not look at the calendar or may
Hi
check out.
guys.
ah,
Okay.
hi.
Uh, there's still Jeff coming, I think. And let me
Yep.
ping Kamel if he tends to come.
Oh, I just followed the link in the agenda. I think that's the
Which link?
Yeah,
the Zoom link.
Ah,
I
yeah, yeah.
I don't actually use the calendar, so I was a little confused what people were talking about. But I guess it's this calendar that you can subscribe to. That didn't
Yeah,
contain
yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
week's meeting.
I know. Because it's independent of the agenda generation. So it's basically double bookkeeping. So
Ah, okay. Yeah,
you
because
have to, yeah,
because
right.
David
But
from
it's
Hasura also mentioned he was confused. He didn't think there
He,
would be a meeting today.
Yeah, I can look that we update that because I think in the calendar, is it even weekly? I think it's only once a month, so
no, it's for everything, but I think it's because it's the
this
fifth one. I think that messes things up. If
okay.
there's actually
Ah, so it only accounts for 4 a month.
probably
Okay. Okay, let's
that's my guess.
start the meeting. We have lots to discuss. I think Jeff, you also had the agenda item more.
Yeah, I was just hoping to, talk about the potential the panel and drafted some questions for the group that I thought might seed a good conversation. I shared it in the Slack channel, but happy to cover that whenever the group, if there's
Yeah.
other items beforehand, let me know. But that would be helpful to talk through.
Okay, let's quick do a round of introductions. I'm gonna start. So let me remind you that by being here, we all agree to the GraphQL Spec membership agreement and to the GraphQL Foundation Code of Conduct. I'm Michael, and I'm the host today.
I'm Martin. I'm from Apollo.
my next Shane from Apollo.
Yeah, Camille from the guild.
I'm going from memory. I think I was next. Jeff from Apollo.
And I'm Derek from Apollo.
Awesome. Okay, and we have like 4 things on the agenda. I think we can start with Jeff's and then go through the others afterwards.
All right. I'll copy this into Zoom chat. This is just a document, just a compiled list of questions for the panel that we could do for GraphQL Conf. It's on the schedule. Just wanted to get the group's opinions on the list of questions here and solicit any like kind of general feedback. I mean, obviously, do feel free to put suggestions and comments in there to mark up any specific feedback you have. But I thought that this, kind of beginning with the folks involved, right? Like, who are you? things like that. Why are you here? Why, what's your connection with this work? Getting, kind of diving into the technical details, like talking about all the cool stuff that's being specified here. I think we could probably use a few more questions in this particular section. That's where this group's opinions on what to talk about, I think, would be super helpful. And then impact, like zooming out a bit once we've talked about, the kind of mechanisms that composite schemas is working with, where we see this going, what we think the big picture is. And then, of course, talking about the future, like the next steps. How can folks in the audience contribute? What's next for the spec and things like that. And I thought that might be a good kind of pace. And then there may be audience questions as well from folks in attendance that we could also have Danielle kind of open up the mic for.
And yeah, I was just wondering like how we are planning on sort of collecting audience questions, whether we want to do any like give people an opportunity to ask questions beforehand. So maybe we can sort of select a few promising questions, or whether we just want to open the mic.
Is it possible we can do something like an online poll while it's up and running while you're talking? And so people can ask questions as you're talking, and then that gets you like, okay, let's move the questions. They're already there, ready to go.
Yeah, Slido. Do you guys know Slido? Yeah. Jeff just posted.
Yep.
That's actually good because you can use your smartphone and then just shoot a couple of questions, and then the moderator can browse through them and pick the good ones.
Yeah, is this going to be streamed live or not? No.
Yes. Or yes. Some of the, I think at least the keynotes are streamed live.
Yeah, this was the last year, just the keynotes.
Oh,
it was just the keynotes. I don't know what it might be that the panels, because the panels could also be a good thing to be streamed live.
Because like on some other conferences, when there were like the panel discussions or whatever, they were collecting questions through Twitter with the hashtag whatever on it. But it's kind of like, if it's not going to be streamed live, that's kind of like pointless for the users.
Yeah, but this is also where Twitter could be, but also we could say here's the Slido link. People can, if it's live. Yeah, that's something
I like that better because it's temporary, and we can always have people tweet like after the fact, but maybe
I like Slido better.
Flooding Twitter with these questions is not worth it.
Yeah, you can see them all in one place as a asker too, and you can upvote, which is kind of nice. So you can sort them as you're viewing them. Like, not everyone's going to see all the tweets and not going to be able to like all of them, so they're not going to like get best ranked that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, but as far as the questions go, I like the structure, and I assume it will sort of turn into a more free-flowing conversation. Like there will be follow-up questions, and but to get things starting, I think this works well.
The one thing I added, I don't know if you saw it, Jeff, in the Slack, is that we maybe have a question like, where do we see this in as an approach against other approaches like schema stitching and stuff like that? Maybe gives an opportunity.
Oh yeah, good call. Sorry, I forgot to copy that in. Absolutely.
Because then we can define like where this fits in.
Yeah. For Danny, who's doing the moderation, how much time do you have total?
I think half an hour, is it?
Half an hour, yeah.
Okay, so you might just want to give her some cues that like, okay, so we should probably spend like 6 minutes on the first part, like 10 minutes on the second part, 10 minutes on the third part, and like, I don't know, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, if it's 30 minutes, that's too many questions. For the, like, given like there's gonna be 3 folks, right? And the questions that probably should be trimmed down.
Yeah, I mean they're not all questions that all 3 of us have to answer, I think.
Yes.
Yeah,
Still,
I think
questions in 30 minutes. So even if one person answering each one of them, it's still like a lot of time.
That's a good point. And I think that there's potentially ways to shave off some of the time in the first one. I think the meat of the conversation would be in the technical and the impact. So maybe we could cut down 1 or 2 questions, like how's it going? Maybe. I think that'll come through, right? Especially like in the coming
the question after that, what surprised you most? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, inspired you personally to work on this? Maybe that's not like something we could save to the end too, especially if the conversation isn't quite like, if there aren't any audience questions, that might be like a nice coda too. But I think, we'll see. Okay, so like, I don't know, what do you think about the panel? Like, 4 minutes or something, 6 minutes total. Impact. I mean, I feel like all of these need to be like I think we should leave like 10 for both, right? 16, 26.
Yeah. This actually makes me wonder, like, especially if we have Slido in place, do we want to take sort of questions per section? Like just a few audience questions?
Thought. Yeah.
Because otherwise it's very, like, it's non-interactive until like the last 10 minutes, and then maybe we'll run out of time.
Yeah.
It's a good call. The most important one should get bubbled at the top, and you can always just answer it. So
yeah.
You can also let people vote on things. Like if we have, for instance, if we had more questions than we know we can talk about, so you could also, what do you want to hear about? Blah. There could be like also these little votings. Gives a lot of interaction there.
I was gonna maybe suggest, I still think this top section could cut time. You could move these both 2, 3, 4, and 5 as questions to put to the end if you just want to have a
what we could by the way with Slido, what we could do is like also have an audience poll who's using federation, who's using ditching, and then you can pick that, even like incorporate that into the discussion if we want to include the audience a bit in the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, we have that, I think, like question 5, but using Slido would make that would give us more information there.
Yeah, because they could actively vote, and you know who in the room, and like they have something to do, are engaged.
Sorry, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think that would see the conversation well, give us a good sense of the audience, and get them familiar with the platform if they haven't used Slido before. So, okay, sounds like I got some homework to get a Slido together. I'll be on hand to kind of help with logistics and everything like that. So happy to take that on.
Thanks.
Awesome.
All right. Just encouraging y'all, if you have any ideas or whatever, come up with an inspired question, just go ahead and pop it in suggestion mode. That way the panel can kind of just view it and see if it makes sense to them, give some feedback, and we'll merge it in. And looking forward to a great combo.
Awesome. The next point of the agenda is the name discussion, and we had some side discussions. I know not everybody was in place for it, where we thought about if we take GraphQL Federation as a name for the specification. I did an inquiry with Lee, and he had some concerns around that we are colliding with the spec, and basically saying that people who use this name at the moment, like for instance Hazura, would be immediately out of date. So Martin reached out to Jeff. No, to not Jeff.
David.
David.
He did reach out to me, in fairness, but not about this particular question.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, you posted it in the chat, but we can.
Yeah. I think that the question here is for Hasura. Like we've seen usage of the term GraphQL Federation, at least in the previous versions of their documentation. And although it seems to be used in more of a sort of architectural pattern sense, not like an actual spec, there could still be confusion. So we want to make sure when we pick this name that sort of that has been addressed, that we've talked that through with them. I asked David about his take on this, and unfortunately he wasn't able to attend this meeting, but he will talk to his team. His first thought was that he didn't think there would be collision. He was very open to like clarifying the usage of GraphQL Federation on their side. And one option would be to sort of similar to how we currently have vendor-specific versions of specs. We have Apollo Federation. If they do have a spec that sort of they want to call out, it could be called Hasura Federation. We could also ask people to refer to like the architectural approach in general as federated GraphQL, for instance. And I would say another part of this question, but something that we'll need to address with David and Hasura in general, is sort of what their relationship to the spec we're working on will be. Because if they are committed to this spec, that might make the conversation even easier.
Yes, that would definitely, because like one of Lee's points was clarity in the specification, that if we have multiple products out there calling themselves GraphQL Federation and we introduce this specification as GraphQL Federation, then we would have like a collision, or even that one of the foundation members, like Hasura, maybe even upset that we basically say they are now spec incompliant. So that's the thing that we started to get out of the way. And we'll see next week what the outcome is there. But it sounded positive. So this brings like, what does the group think here? Is anybody opposed, has better ideas, or is in favor of the name? I know Martin's.
Yeah, I think on Apollo we all agree that GraphQL Federation is a good name. That's what a lot of folks are already calling this stuff on the various presentation, various like blog posts and whatnot. They doesn't necessarily have to be, like calling Apollo Federation just GraphQL Federation, right? So from our perspective, I think we all agree with Martin's point of view that that's would be great. And because it also makes it easier for folks to understand what we're trying to do, because there's already some recognition of what it is, right? So I would say if Michael, you're fully on board on that, and Kamil, you're on board, probably you should be good to go.
Yeah, Kamil?
Yeah.
I am, yes.
Yeah, just to have it on the record,
Yeah, I know.
And we also talked with Uri, and Uri was on board as well. So that's
yes. Yes. Like I just wanted to that everybody here also states it, so that we have it at least somewhere on the video.
Yeah.
Like from our side, we are okay with it. We already, as I said, we discussed that over the last two or 3 days, and like when we have the response from Hasura, I will take it back to the TSC, and we try to vote. And it might be that we first need to introduce that into the working group, so it's publicly discussed in the main working group. It could be that it's enough to discuss it here, but I will talk to Lee on that, like just to have the process clean. And that would a bit also reflect on the messaging on the conference, right?
I just pasted a Google search for the exact phrase GraphQL Federation. I'm in agreement. I think Apollo Federation was the name that initially kicked off this whole idea, and people have kind of just naturally taken that name and called it GraphQL Federation as the vendor neutral thing, even when Apollo was technically just the only one initially. But I think it could be within where I am for calling it GraphQL Federation, but I think maybe what could help clarify this is we specify in our group like that. How do you indicate that you are compatible with the working group spec? Is like maybe there's an exact phrase like we are compliant with the GraphQL Federation spec or the GraphQL Federation Foundation spec, or like this is the words you should say you should use like when you're compliant with our spec or something. Like, I don't know, something.
I would like
that actually brings me to a
yeah.
related point that we also discussed. I don't think it's in the agenda directly, like we have the reference implementation question on there, but we also talked about a compatibility suite, right?
Yes,
as an outcome for this working group.
Yes, yes, it's just to round the name discussion off, is like it should not be a complicated name. Like we would be in a bad state, I think, if we have to say it's a GraphQL Foundation, GraphQL Federation. It should just be GraphQL Federation. And I think I agree there with Martin that if you talk about the pattern, it should be federated GraphQL. And I think then we have a clear messaging. And okay, I'll take that back to Lee to see how we can sort that out. And we wait out for Azura to just tell us they're okay with it. And then I think we can move forward. I will also ping IBM. Like I know Roy Derricks. He's working there just to also have their feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. Point of order on this too might be that like the capital F in Federation may be operative here, right? Like this is a proper noun, GraphQL Federation, but federated GraphQL and GraphQL small f Federation could have different semantic meaning. Like one of the things that's always confused me, or not confused me, but I've always found interesting about Federation is when people say GraphQL Federation, they might, in the past, at least when they have said it, they might have been referring to one of like three things, right? Like a pattern, a specific implementation, or a general kind of compatible implementation. And I think that, the foundation and the specifications role in helping to clarify what these terms mean, because now they're increasingly being used in press and in analysts and things like that. And I think it behooves us to kind of figure out a clear choice for that. So if we use, if the standards community is on board and if we can get the foundation on board, I think that this is going to be probably the way forward for users everywhere. So I'm really excited that we can kind of speak with one voice on this.
Yeah, and it would make it very clear what it is. Like there's a spec to that, and that now leads us really to the second point here. It's not only the spec text. Like we talked about reference implementation, for instance, and I don't know who brought it up, Yuri or Martin. Brought up the TSC 39 process around validating if somebody is spec compliant or if an implementation is spec compliant. And this also had like positive feedback from Lee, who was very much in favor of it, and who also said it's like he also would have loved to have something like this for the GraphQL core spec, right? To have a test environment or the core specification. And then since we don't have a reference implementation to get the feature through in the spec, you basically need two implementations validating a new features once we have the initial.
Yeah, I think that works great to sort of facilitate experimentation, because I mean, similar to how browsers experiment with new features, like they can implement it in actual production code. They can see how it interacts with the rest of their architecture, instead of like some reference implementation that's out there, but that doesn't quite work the way real implementations do, and it's not properly being maintained. And for something as complex as this, I think it's good if we have sort of actual, well, something being part of an actual production system, but also being used in production. Like that's how you experiment with some of these features. I would imagine. You try them out. They might be behind some kind of flag or prefix, but you do want actual usage to figure out if something is worth implementing, or what the right direction for certain features would be. So yeah, I'm all in favor of like the TSC 39 model for that. I think another question is sort of what the test suite could look like, what the best format for that is. Like this, I think the TC 39 is more about the independent implementations and the staging of features. But
yeah, I think for composition, at least, the tests could be very, very easy, because we could have lots of test cases formulated as concrete compositions, right?
Yeah.
For the server, we have to invest a bit more. I mean, Derek did already invest in such a thing, like for Apollo. We can have a look at what is there and how good that worked, and maybe steal ideas from that.
Yeah, and Camille's compatibility suite for Apollo Federation as well.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I would say that like Camille's work is, yeah, that one is that could be used as a foundation for all the future stuff to build on top. Because the compatibility suite that I was working on, that was actually pretty basic stuff, that verifying that the subgraphs respond according to the expectations. So it's not really validating the federation per se, it's more of validating the subgraphs behaving the way.
And the subgraph spec becomes less important with the new spec, because we don't have unders for entities and similar mechanisms.
Yeah, that's good. So we can, once we have the composition stuff worked out, already start working on the test suite for the composition for the spec.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say that like from the compatibility at like the gateway level, or like the actual request, we do need to have like data, and we need to run like GraphQL service. So it will be more complex than just what the setup I did is pretty much like a bunch of subgraphs that are like bootstrapped, and then they contain real data, and then I write like queries, and then I expect the result. So I designed the subgraph and the queries in a way that actually forces the gateway of choice to go through a certain path and check it. So it's not like the subgraph themselves are completely valid, or like can resolve like all the requests. This is like that specific use case. So we can actually reuse that to do the compatibility like audit or whatever for the composite schema.
Yeah, maybe just I want to take this time to dive into like, let's figure out the technical details, but I think there's a line maybe needs to be drawn, like or decided, of what 2 lines. There's the first is composition. Like we have these 2 schemas, merge them together, and the output should look like something. And I think that even that output isn't necessarily, we haven't been talking about like, what do you call the merge thing? Like, do you have specific directives, or we just look at the types? Like there's that thing, and then there's the, okay, now I have this query I want to run against that composed artifact, and then like that should behave in a certain manner too. We're not going to be defining the runtime bits either. So like, should we just focus first on just like composition test suite, like, and then therefore all we need to run the test suite is like, we have two defined inputs. We will test your output to see if it matches our expected output for composition alone. Or should we extend into the runtime, like queries and execution?
I think we want both, but it might be good to separate the two. I mean, that definitely makes sense to me. And we have to look at sort of the right level of abstraction for testing execution. Like we basically want to check whether a valid query, like against the supergraph, can in fact be executed. But we don't want to test at the level of like what subqueries get executed in what order. We just want to make sure the result is valid.
Same thing for like the actual format of the query plan. That doesn't have to.
No, that doesn't figure in this at all. No, it's input output.
Just basically like given those inputs, given though I expect this sort of output, kind of verifying that.
I think the query plans could be hugely different. And there's also a lot of optimization that might come in, and where you put your, where basically you invest more into that. There could also be something like PGO, like profile guided optimizations in query plans, which makes it hugely complex to say a query plan is correct or incorrect. So it's really observing that you get the right output.
Yeah.
And I think if you think about that, it's much easier to validate like the gateway as opposed to a GraphQL server on its own, because like if you build a basic set of subgraphs and have a gateway on that running, basically it has to produce the data. So it's a very easy test suite that could come out now.
Well,
designing the schema and the subgraph schemas
to
allow for the different types of queries we want to test. I mean, that's what Camille has been doing with the existing test suite, but I imagine that's a lot of design work.
What I mean is like for the implementer of a gateway, you basically have to give us your gateway. Like when we worked on GraphQL CATS, which basically was the compatibility test for GraphQL, the main problem that we discovered is that you have to implement the GraphQL server behind that. So the validation would be hugely complex for each implementer. But in this case, it's you write your gateway, you throw it in the test suite, and you see what's wrong.
Yeah.
So this is what I meant with could be very simple. Okay, awesome. That means we have the 3 items out of the way. Let's talk about batching. I made a proposal, still working on it. Also getting feedback from Benji. Yeah. So this is Appendix B. There will be Appendix C, which deals with request batching. The way we want to have that is that they are both optional to the specification. So you can implement request batching, or you can implement variable batching, and that is basically up to the server implementer. The same way as trusted documents are like an add-on to the core spec.
Yeah.
So what's in the over-HTTP spec as a base is just the simple here's a request. The simples of GraphQL request. Everything else is basically appendixes.
But variable batching includes request batching and defer stream support, right? Or is that optional?
Yes. Yeah. So we basically have 2 appendices. We could formulate it in one appendice that we formulate as batching, but I found it easier to write it in 2 appendices, because then you can focus on why variable batching, what the use cases are for variable batching. I a bit outlined that here. Also the difficulties that you have if you wanted to do that with a simple field batching, for instance, you can better explain it into separate chapters, but they intertwine. I will get into that in a second. Yeah, outlines here a bit what the problem is once you have nested variables. I'm not even going in skip take here. It's already a problem when you just want to have a requirement, for instance, that you get in as a nested variable, right? Okay, yeah. That's the basics. Then this is the major change to the original request parameters, is that variables is required because like this is how we distinguish between the requests. If you implement the standard request and the non-standard request, we basically take something as a batch if it has variables, and that is an array of maps. So that is very the rest from the request parameters is absolutely the same. Okay, and we go. That's a bit encoding, a bit examples here, how that goes in. We have the same accept structure, so you can have whatever format you want to have over that. That's also a bit up to the server implementer if you take multipart or if you take SSE, even if you wanted to do that, or whatever else format you want to do. What we made sure is that it's that we don't have an ordered response. That's why in the response we have a variable index. The variable index is the index to the variable position, like basically the map that we are executing. So the order of the maps in the array that you pass in. And this is the way the user can reorder that. And that also allows us to, if we wanted to process that with multiple threads or whatever the server does, it can be sent in any order back. And it also allows us for defer and stream, because we know, okay, these are now two responses for the same variable index. So we know how to handle them then in the stream. When we factor into that request batching, then we have a request index as well. So basically, you have a matrix where you can see where this belongs to this request, but to this variable position.
Yeah.
So you can start commenting on it.
So one thing I think on the one versus multiple appendices. I mean, if it makes sense, breaking it up, I think is fine, but it would be great if we also had an example of sort of the combined usage in there.
Yes, I mean, we can also describe it as one appendix batching.
Well, it could be a batching and then subsections underneath it for the separate.
That might actually be helpful, because then we have a place to put sort of the combined example in as well, and we can sort of describe the relationship between the two in one section that people may read as a whole.
Yeah, I like the idea of allowing implementations to be partially compatible. I think that's what this is allowing, frankly, because a lot of people today, a lot of implementations already support request batching. And so that way if we add like this new batching spec and like we just invalidate all those implementations, say you're no longer valid, like they at least say they're partially, right? We do this part, right? We're, batching appendix B compatible, we're not batching compatible A compatible, and we're therefore not entirely batching compatible, but yeah.
And do we want to show examples with defer and stream as well? That's sort of a third interacting feature.
So why I formulate that as a question. Also, some examples in
that
here.
Would be a good question of how the actually defer
in stream,
work, right?
Stream.
I think we do have a solution for that.
Because
At least I remember Michael had a solution.
Not yet. I'm just asking that because we have not yet raised a pull request for different stream for the specification. We could do that as well. This is all version 2 of the spec. We just held it back for now, but this is already not going in version 1, right?
Yeah.
This is the GraphQL over HTTP spec 2nd edition.
So I think with the defer, actually, since you mentioned there's actually a index for
yes,
for that probably should solve the problem of defer, right?
Yes. So this is like we tested it also out in a reference implementation that I built. How we handle specifically the stream formats. So we need to know from which request this comes and from which variable index. If you have both, you need both of these indicators, both of these indexes, and that's how you know. Okay, these additional incremental responses belong here. And within the incremental response, we have the path where this is then folded into the overall result. I don't know if you have in your mind now the structure of the different stream. There we have, I think it was a path. Look it up. I not have it in beautiful. Yeah, we have this incremental, the incremental list. Basically, these are all optionals. Basically, on the GraphQL result, you can have an incremental list, and the incremental list is again an operation result. And then you have like has next. There's request index that we now have, variable index. So there are a couple of optional values that can be there, and that help you to identify. Like this is just the overall declaration that this can have, like depending on which thing is there. But yeah, it's maybe good to raise that as well, the different stream, but I will try to do that off to someone else.
Yeah, the follow-up question be also like on the bottom, I think you mentioning the JSON-L standard.
Yes.
Is that set in stone? People are set on that
format? No.
Just regular
so
JSON?
No. For the first proposal, yes. We have, so what we discussed internally is the symmetry that you have here. But it's not a must, like it's a may in the spec. And the reason why we do that in the first proposal is because it aligns very well with the core spec, in which we have an application plus application GraphQL plus JSON. And like for incremental results, you can take a plus JSON-L, which is very compressed. But I formulated that as may, and you can use whatever format you want to have additionally. So I expect, and that's what I did in the reference implementation of this, in the not reference implementation, in the POC that we did. I used also multipart, and I also experimented with SSE, just to have it working in all the things. I am not sure what Benji's thoughts are on the format issue, so I would leave this discussion about the actual encodings to the HTTP group. For me, it's the structure important. What they put in as response type should be up to them. And I think there are also people from Apollo there, so fight for your formats. That okay?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Yep. Yeah, there by the way was also somebody else from GraphQL.net that who immediately commented on JSON.
Yeah,
but he was more he wanted more the array, and the array for me is out.
Yeah, no, we need the incremental delivery, right?
Yeah,
the out of order.
Yeah, because the array, you will struggle with parsing and everything.
Yeah. One other thing might be like this is an appendix and it's an optional part of like our spec that sort of refers to something that'll become part of the GraphQL over HTTP spec. But do we want to put in a warning somewhere, like to explain that although it's optional, like without it, like expect the worst?
Yeah, that's why like I framed already this particular approach. This approach is particularly useful for gateways.
Yeah.
I mean, this should be maybe stronger. Should maybe
I think it should be stronger, and that maybe it should not be like it should also be in here, but maybe we want some wording in the like the general a general section that sort of refers to this and is more like a formatted as a warning.
Yes, you should. Yeah. Also, if you want to be a subgraph in an orchestration, then this is a must.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
not
technically not.
but yes.
Yes, but then either you have n+1.
Yes, you will. And that's the strong warning we highly suggest. Yeah, be careful.
I mean, we can also formulate it as a must for the spec. You must do that, even though that an implementer decides to allow for also subgraphs that don't support that. To push people to implement it could also be a strategy.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the gateway must implement it, but subgraphs may implement it.
Yeah.
Okay. That actually makes sense to me. Yeah.
And then you have also awareness. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I guess, but like, who's going to send like, I don't know, I guess that's helpful for clients and not to like, well, why would my gateway need to support like all the different ways of batching?
Yeah, I mean,
I guess it is.
I mean, we work also with variable batching, with request batching. Works also, like it's also a fallback. If you only have that, we will work with that.
Yeah. We strongly recommend you implement it. I mean,
we can find on the wording. For me was more the because there was, I think Shane phrased that, like there was no place to look at the technical aspects, and now we can at least say, okay, these are the properties that we need.
Yeah.
This is the general way how it works, and it's the response. I described it as a stream of GraphQL responses, like abstract. This also, there's nothing about the format, right? This is about the format, but I might rewrite that a bit. It's phrased above as may, and then I leave it up to the HTTP group to decide on the details of if that is multipart or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And but even if it's multipart, we would always allow other. Like that's why, like here, clients should indicate with the accept header what they want, and that leaves also the gateway. If the gateway has a preference for format, it could also ask like do this. Then we also state here like you should always supply the default as a fallback, because that is kind of, if that is the default, it has the highest chance of being implemented. And Yeah, and then basically the server can, if you don't supply an accept header, the server can basically use anything.
And we're putting this in here for convenience now, but once it gets accepted into the GraphQL over HTTP spec, would we like remove this appendix and just refer to that spec?
How do you mean that?
Well, if this gets accepted,
yeah,
by the GraphQL over HTTP working group, and it's part of a future version of that spec, or maybe like this proposal itself will already be part of their repository. Would we want to point to that instead of having our own version here?
Yeah, this is already a GraphQL over HTTP. This already.
Oh, I completely misread that. Yeah.
So we don't have it in our repository. I immediately raised it with them.
Yeah.
And that's why I also say I just, for me, it's I also wrote Benji basically. He said just specify it down, and then they will go over it and polish things out. And also, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that makes it even more important that the warning about support for this is part of our spec and not just in here.
Yeah, but like even in the HTTP spec, I wanted to make clear like what is the use case for it.
Yeah.
The use case is basically the composite schema spec. Or the initial
there's
case.
client usage as well, like for variable batching.
Yeah, I think I pointed weakly to that. And I was thinking this approach is particularly useful with graphical gateways. We can work on this while, and then for bulk operations, for instance, is the use case I also could imagine if you want to fill things up, like mutation bulk operation, things like that.
This is a little forward thinking, but we kind of discussed this a while back.
Yeah.
But I think for our case, initially, we can reference this as you definitely should, but it's not a must. You should. We highly recommend you do this both variable and batching. And then in the future, we can say, okay, well, we're going to release the 2026 version of the composite schema spec. And that changes it to a must, right? Like now you must be compatible. You must implement variable patching, because what's going to happen right now, it's going to be a little bit annoying, but like if it's only a recommendation, the GraphQL gateways will have to figure out, does the subgraph support which protocol? I'm going to have to like try to send requests, or I'm going to have configuration to figure this out. So we can, down the road, we can change this to you must do this for the subgraph to be compatible, and kind of like slowly iterate to making people implement those standards.
Well, that's the problem with the GraphQL spec right now, that the servers cannot tell you what they support or not. So like, do they support defer? I don't know. That's I think
it's a more general problem that we need to solve, I think. Yeah.
I think people are working on that problem already, but yes.
Yeah, no, we are not really working on it. We discussed that. So because like we discussed that several times. Like you could send a head request or an options request. But then there is also like the well-known standard that authentication scenarios you have. Like something like that would be pretty good to figure out. Like what protocol format do you do? I think from a schema standpoint, it's very easy to like determine if you support different stream. For instance, you just look for the directives. But from like there are so many hacks to inspect the schema to find out the features. But from a transport level, we don't have anything, and there are techniques actually out there that other protocols use. It would be good to have that. But in the meantime, like you can always like have a setting as a fallback for the gateway where you say, okay, this subgraph will support this. Awesome. So yeah, you can comment on that. I will be incorporating the request batching into this. And let me quickly put it here into the chat. And then easy copy. And then we should we need to have a section in our spec pointing to this proposal. I don't know if we should have that in the beginning or do it as well as an appendix.
I would say not an appendix, but I think we want a section about execution, right? That also talks about like
yes.
how we interact with subgraphs.
Yes.
And I would imagine that also includes the transport and the batching.
Yeah, because you kind of want to put out the requirements a bit, like the external requirements.
Yeah.
Okay. I will look at what we can write. I also get a bit.
We're still on composition, so
yeah.
Still plenty to do there.
No, this is mainly like that everybody else can kind of investigate into transport, because as soon as we have implementations for the spec, it would be good if there are at least a couple. I mean, you probably also all right with request batching, at least in the initial phase, but it would be good if there are at least a couple of servers implementing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so by the way, one restriction that we're going to put in the beginning is, so in the POC, I also experimented with subscriptions and stuff. This was highly experimental, and we're going to leave it out for the first drafts at least, because there could be a lot of issues with that. We also thought it through, like if you and like you can have your input on that, but the problem with subscriptions is that you cannot cancel one of the subscription. You would always need to cancel the whole batch. What is cool actually, and I will show that a bit in my talk, GraphQL about batching, is you could have like a mutation that does something. Then you query that, and while this all is running, you already are subscribed, and you get events over all the stuff that is happening there. But for that to work properly, you also need ordering of execution. Like if, for instance, the mutation runs first and the subscription subscribes too late, and you don't have like replayable events or so, then it's not fun. There are a lot of side effects, but like you could do pretty crazy things with it if you explore the edges around that. But we're gonna leave that out.
I was gonna suggest that to keep it simple, should we just say subscriptions are not supported, because you always should generally have single batching is not supported for subscription. If you do the request batching, all of the requests in a batch request have to be of the same type, so either query or mutation. You cannot mix and match those either.
Yeah, at the moment, that's also what we should talk. But this different working group, at the moment, the spec is only concerned with query and mutation. Like we don't have like a subscription is not part at the moment of the over HTTP spec. Okay. It's something that is also on the agenda for version 2, which we can have a look at then. Or like for the variable batching, I will do the same restriction. So it's useful for mutation and query and mutation at the moment. And that's actually for what we needed in the gateway. At least I expect Apollo is also not doing subscription merging in the way that you subscribe to 2 subgraphs and merge the events, right? You're not doing that at the moment.
The 2 separate subgraphs? or two requests to the same subgraph.
So you have do you have two subgraphs? On both subgraphs, you have the same subscription, and you would subscribe to both of them and merge these events?
No, we don't support that.
Exactly.
No, a subscription field needs to be implemented by one particular subgraph right now.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
Yes. You can't have shareable on subscription.
Yeah.
But you can have subscription going across entities, and you will be fetching this from multiple graphs.
And that's okay.
Yeah, but that's a follow-up. Like the subscription stream,
one,
like the event stream, like originates from one subgraph, and then sort of what you query on top of that in your subscription request, that can come from other subgraphs.
Yeah, that's where I see variable batching coming in, right? For these completions of the data that you have additionally, and that's basically query mutation.
Yeah.
But that brings us at least to one transport thing we need for very standard subscription, also the transport at some point written down.
No. Well, next week.
Okay, awesome. Good. Was a productive meeting.
Yeah.
And we can close it out here.
Sounds good. Well, only one virtual meeting to go before we meet in person. At least some of us.
Yes. Yeah. I'm flying on the Friday before the conference.
I'm arriving on Sunday, but yeah.
Sunday. Yeah. I just so I'm in the time zone.
I don't think I updated everyone here. I ended up actually did making it work, and I'll be working at the Apollo booth on the conference floor too. So I'm coming.
Great.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's organize something where we, just go for a drink or something.
Yeah.
As a group.
Now I get FOMO. Oh, come on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay.
All right.
Then let's close out. See you guys next week.
Yep.